Hey folks, Machinery Pete here. Got a special video for you today as we observe Veterans Day. Of course, we're all greatly indebted to folks who served our country, helped make it the free land we all love today. When I was at a dealer meeting this past year in Louisiana, I met David Savoie, who has an amazing family story revolving around the John Deere Battalion, which back in World War II, to help the effort to win the war, John Deere, along with other farm equipment manufacturers, created service units that were made up of folks from the company and from the local dealerships. And David Savoie's father, Lucien Savoie, pictured here from a small town in Louisiana, volunteered to serve. And Lucien was a salesman at the local John Deere dealership. And I interviewed David about his dad's experience. And fascinating to hear David tell the story. And then at the end of the interview, David was kind enough to share some amazing pictures and anecdotes. Pictures his dad took when he was over in Europe helping win World War II. So let's go to that video interview now with David Savoie. Hey folks, Machinery Pete here. I'm down in New Orleans having a good time at a large dealer association meeting and ran into a fascinating story here. This is David Savoie with, is it Sunshine Quality
Solutions? Yeah.
And you're in southern Louisiana, right?
Pretty much all of South Louisiana, correct.
Okay. Well, David, now you gave a presentation yesterday. Fascinating. Your father, and what was your father's name?
My father's Lucien Savoie.
Lucien Savoie, and he was in the John Deere Battalion.
Yes, yeah.
World War II. Why don't you?
It's a really great story, and Dad was working at a John Deere dealership in Crowley, Louisiana, down in Southwest Louisiana, and Rice City Tractor was the name at the time, and it's a dealership founded in 1929. Okay. So it was, at the time, it wasn't that old of a dealership, but in the late 30s, with the war coming on. Yeah. The president of John Deere at the time, Charles Deere Wyman, was a World War I veteran. He was also head of the War Production Board. He put together a battalion of John Deere employees and also from and dealership employees to pretty much get an ordnance maintenance battalion to repair the equipment in the field.
So all the tanks?
All tanks, half tracks, small arms, firing systems, everything in that end of it for World War II. So letters went out to John Deere dealers across the country. Okay. And my dad and Milton Myers, another employee at the John Deere store in Crowley, responded and signed up for John Deere Battalion. It had been about 800 people, 800 military people. It's 5 companies. They started out in camp in North Carolina. Camp Sutton. I keep calling it, they call it Camp Mutton because they ate a lot of lamb there.
Oh,
Years later, Daddy wouldn't eat lamb. But they actually trained down to General Patton at camp, in North Carolina. Shipped them across the country to Mojave Desert to train with General Patton's desert maneuvers, thinking they may be going to North Africa.
Sure.
So then by the time they were ready to travel across, which would have been in the fall of 43. They started in the fall of 42. So the fall of 43, they shipped them back across the country to New York, traveled across the Atlantic by themselves, just one ship, the Queen Elizabeth.
And how many troops did they have?
18,000 troops on the ship.
Oh.
And it went by themselves because that ship was pretty fast, and they didn't probably want to get into slow convoys. I guess they felt they would outrun all the U-boats. Ended up in southern England, Warminster, England is where they ended up. In the fall of fall of 43. They were there for the first Christmas of 43. And because they said they had a big party for all the children in town because candy, sugar, and everything in England time was very scarce. So they mustered all the candy and toys they could, and, had a great time with those children. Stayed in England until December of 44. And a good story was we had already, D-Day was June, of course. And one of the things they did that whole spring was they received all the goods. We had 6 million tons of supplies in southern England prepared to invade Europe.
Wow.
They would take all the equipment, take it off the ships. Of course, it was sprayed with salt water. Make sure it all ran, got everything ready to go. Yep. And also a big thing they did was waterproofing equipment, trucks, tanks for D-Day.
Okay.
They were involved in all of that
wow.
because they knew that was going to be a big event. Just so D-Day comes, June of 44, they're still doing the supply. They have parts people, they got mechanics, they have a knowledge of inventory.
How many people in the John Deere Battalion?
About 800.
800.
About half were from the John Deere company, about half from dealerships.
Okay.
Mechanics, parts people, like dad, a salesman.
Right.
God, you know. And so.
And what made your dad want to join? Do you know? What did he say about that?
I think it was just opportunity to serve in a situation where you're not. I mean, I don't know back then. I mean, it was a good service. It was a needed service for the company, and you were with your fellow John Deere employees. In the letter said I did make mention you would be with your same type of people, same type of employers. Now
so you have the paperwork that was the original letter that was sent to you?
Yes, I have copies of that. Yes,
wow.
Yes, and it's all part of the good story. It's a great story. And so the fall of 44, they prepared to go over to set up the shop, their big repair shop.
Okay.
And Dad and Milton Mars get picked out early because they can both fluent, being from South Louisiana, they both fluent in French. So they went over there to serve as interpreters to get set up. So they did get set up in a little town outside called Mojave, Belgium, which is southern Belgium.
Okay.
December 1, 44, they set up in Belgium. December 16th, 1944, and the thought at the time was the war was going to be over by Christmas. We got the Germans back across, the end of Germany, we're moving across. December 16th, 1944, Battle of the Bulge starts. Yes. Came right through Bastogne, right. Their position, they ended up being about, I figure, between 40 and 50 miles from the furthest thrust by the German army, right in line with where they were, because they were going to split the armies in half. And they wanted to, German, they would have been right in the lineup. So it was. So the equipment
that must have been needing repair during that must have just been unbelievable.
I think one of the best customers, if you want to look at that, was Patton, because his tanks were, back and forth. And I said, how would you like to be a dealership? You imagine you have all this equipment to work on, and Patton's screaming at you to get your stuff fixed. I think I'd get it fixed.
Yes.
But they did repair, and I do have several pictures of showing hundreds of tanks, Sherman tanks, damaged, and a lot of the damage wasn't good. A lot of it was battle damage, and you had to pull out, there was body parts in some of the tanks, so it was very, very, and especially those guys, wasn't a good deal.
Sure.
But they did their job, and they had several large shops, and did all area, whatever they needed to do, and they had deuce and a half trucks would pull the tanks back, and an interesting story was they said the Germans and the Russians, when something was damaged, they would just leave it. They would not attempt to repair anything.
Okay.
And we had a thing because we had to, obviously our tanks came a lot further over, and the timing of it was critical.
And you were saying what was the head of Deere's, the guy's name at the time?
Charles Deere Wyman.
And he was actually related back to John Deere?
He was a grandson. He was actually the last direct relative of John Deere to run the company.
And he had fought in World War I?
He was a World War I veteran, and he was recommissioned into the Army. And he was actually head of the War Commission Board. That's what the companies had to do back then. They couldn't just produce all new goods. Of course, they had to produce. They all did different.
So that was pretty a lot of foresight there to plan for experts to fix our stuff.
The idea was the war in Europe. They didn't know how long it was going to last, and of course, it's perfect. Europe historically is perfect for tank battles with the rolling hills. So they knew there'd be a lot of action over there, and they didn't know if it'd be 5 months or 5 years. So they felt if we're going to be over here, and the plan was Roosevelt was going to build 120,000 Sherman tanks. We ended up building about 50,000 because they did something else with it. Steel was actually a very rare commodity. So, but we still had 50-something thousand tanks over there, which was, everyone's just like a tractor. I mean, it's got transmission, engines, and back then mass production, like I said, it happened, So they ended up in the war, and they were there, and then, of course, we repelled, Battle of Bulge ended, and they kept doing their job and getting stuff repaired as they went through the war. The war ended, and they stayed over. Of course, you have 3 million troops over there. Not everybody's coming back tomorrow. But they did keep them together as a functional unit in training because they were going to be deployed to Japan if, in fact, we did invade mainland Japan.
Before the bombs were dropped.
And then we dropped the bombs, and they were there all summer, and they were part of the occupational force. Went into Aachen, went into Cologne.
Wow.
Just just tremendous damage.
So your dad,
Damage.
Deere Battalion, was there beyond the end of the war.
Right. Yes, and he has some good pictures of the cathedral at Cologne. If you've been there, you know that cathedral. In most of the towns, the churches did not get bombed. I don't know how they missed them. They were not purposely not bombed, of course, but that cathedral made it through, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And so got through, and when the war was over, and they still stayed over there, and they came back. I think in December, they Camp Lucky Strike. If you ever hear that term called Camp Lucky Strike, that's where they departed back from France back to America
in '46.
Yes, it was December of '45.
Okay.
And on the SS Argentina, they came back across. I have a picture of that ship. And January 1, 1946, I got a picture of the Statue of Liberty. They hit
January 1st, 46.
1946. They hit.
Imagine what your dad felt when he saw that.
That'd have been I imagine that night before that New Year's was a great party.
Yes.
You know.
Well, then David, your dad comes back to Louisiana, and did he get back into the implement business then?
He got back, and he was back with Rice City Tractor, the John Deere dealership, as a salesman. Now his dad was a threshing machine mechanic. That's what he worked on, threshing machines.
Okay.
And so him and his brother, and I don't know exactly how this came about, but him and his brother acquired the J.I. Case dealership in Crowley and Rain, two small towns in Acadia Parish, where we're from, in the Rice area. And
what was that dealership called?
Savoy Tractor.
Savoy Tractor.
Yeah, same name. And they operated that from 1950 to probably 1978 or 79.
Okay.
And
that's when your dad retired?
Yes, when my dad retired. And I got out of college in 1981.
Okay.
And his wife's brother, his brother-in-law, was the main owner in the John Deere dealership, Rice City Tractor, which is where my dad started out from the war.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, we all intermingled. And so I went to work for him.
Okay.
In December of 1981.
And were
I went
you
to work
on
for Rice
the
City Tractor.
sales side, David?
Yes, I did sales. Did sales for a number of years, and then we were bought out and formed Quality Equipment in 1992. I stayed on as general manager. We acquired 4 more stores.
Okay.
And just recently, in October of this year, we merged our company with Sunshine Equipment. We are Southwest Louisiana, and Sunshine Equipment is Southeast Louisiana. So we're now Sunshine Quality Solutions.
And how many stores total?
We're 14 stores
14
right now. So pretty much all of South Louisiana. And we have rice in our area and sugarcane on this side. I say this side, Southeast Louisiana, there's a lot of sugarcane. And we do a lot of small ag and turf. It's all John Deere equipment now. So
well, I love the family history, David. That is, and you were saying even just recently you found your wife found a picture of, was it Joe Louis, the famous boxer?
And when Dad and them were in England, we have a picture of just Joe Louis exhibition match, and I just saw it and said, oh cool, Joe Louis did an exhibition match. Found out what a great patriot Joe Louis was in the war. He gave $100,000, which was the winnings of 2 of his purses for 2 of his fights before he joined the Army, and $100,000 to the Army and Navy relief effort.
Wow.
Which is probably several $1 million in today's dollars.
Joe Louis was probably like one of the most famous people in the world.
And he actually joined the Army, and over the course of 2 years did 96 exhibition boxing matches for troops in England, and I'm assuming probably later in Europe. And the picture I have has got to be one of those 96.
And your dad took the picture?
Yes, Dad took the picture, and it was in his war album. So
that probably made your dad and his buddies feel kind of good when Joe Louis came by. Huh?
Yes. And I like the story. There's a picture in October of '44. Dad, they got to travel around France when they were after the war, and they were still there. And his dad's on the Eiffel Tower. And I said that was made possible by a general in the German Army. General Kleutz is his last name. I don't remember his first name, but he was the governor or a commandant of Paris in '44. And once the Germans were being run out of France, Hitler ordered him to level Paris. He said, "You destroy everything." And this general refused to. Actually, he ordered a surrender through the Swedish embassy with the French resistance. It restricted all his troops and himself.
So he went
as
rogue.
POW. Yeah, he actually was able to survive the war.
Wow.
And the movie is Paris Burning, and the book is Paris Burning. Is what Hitler was Hitler's telegram to him, "Is Paris burning? Like, have you destroyed it yet?" And so a lot of good things in the war. Not that it was good, but that was a good thing, and preserved Paris as it is today. After we had bypassed Paris, not wanting to destroy it earlier in the year. So great
David,
story.
I had heard about the John Deere Battalion, but I'd never met anyone that had a connection. And did you and your dad were there any like reunions of the battalion?
Dad and Milton did attend several reunions in the 80s. And I want to say they probably started in the 70s, and a group of retired John Deere employees who were in the battalion in Moline, and John Deere would host them every year, every 2 or 3 years. This will happen in 1992. Dad passed away in 91. In 1992, I was attending a John Deere product intro in Moline, and we stayed at the same hotel as the battalion members, and I got to get to meet several of them, and it was one of the greatest memories of my life.
Well, David, your dad did his part to help America win the war.
They did. It was a very, very productive part and very meaningful part too. So it was a great story. And I know there's a lot of people that probably knew about it. I may have had someone that family members, and it's just a great resource. Great.
Well, David, I love how you're keeping the history alive and sharing it with a smile. And no, it's a piece of our past, and again, fantastic. And again, hats off to what you guys are doing. It's Sunshine Quality Solutions.
Yes.
What's your website?
www.sqsolutions.com.
sqsolutions.com.
Yeah.
And can you give me some of the pictures from?
I sure will. I'll send you. And we have a lot of pictures, and a lot of good pictures. So.
Well, that's fantastic. Hey, great to meet you, David, and thanks again for sharing the story of your dad in World War II with the John Deere Battalion.
Great, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, David was kind enough to share his PowerPoint presentation that he gave, the talk about World War II, and his dad, Lucien Savoy, and the John Deere Battalion at the dealer meeting. And I just wanted to share these because there's some amazing pictures as we walk through these. And David was kind enough to present some notes along the way. But of course, late 30s, U.S. was feeling a little isolationist at the time as the rest of Europe was coming to a boil. Germany, of course, building up troops. And at the time, according to David's research, the U.S. Army had less than 300,000 troops in the late 1930s. Again, isolationist feel after World War I, which was natural, but had quite a ramp up to get ready for World War II, obviously. Now, the president of Deere at the time, great-grandson of John Deere himself, Charles Deere Weeman, last descendant of John Deere to lead the company, and he was a World War I veteran, commissioned as a colonel in U.S. Army in 1942, and you can see he helped plan the maintenance battalion. Now here, this was interesting, the notice that went out to John Deere factory and company people, and also folks at the dealership, basically saying, we need your help. And one of the folks that answered the call was David's father, Lucien Savoy, pictured here, Rice City Tractor Corporation down in Crowley, Louisiana. And this is Lucien's friend, Milton Myers, pictured back in the day, and a little information about the John Deere Battalion, made up of 5 companies. You can see 700 men, different companies, what they were responsible for. And again, sort of with the idea of maintenance of the equipment being the key thing. And of course, I love that long-term thinking of U.S. folks, seeing how that would be needed and a good idea. So Savannah, Illinois, this was the first training for Company E. And a picture there. And you heard David in the interview talk about Camp Sutton, which the guys refer to as Camp Mutton because of all the lamb they ate there. Trained January 1943, training under George Patton. And were also sent to the desert, Mojave Desert, to train, thinking they'd be deployed to North Africa. So here you go, September 1944. The train to New York stopped at Moline, and they took a picture there, Deere and Company. So again, September 1944. And then as David mentioned in the video interview, they boarded the Queen Elizabeth, hopped on that boat, and can you imagine with all the U-boats and the danger there and all the troops on that boat making their way over to England. November 1943, they arrive in England. Let's see. Getting, of course, ready for D-Day there, coming in June of 44. Some maps, preparing for D-Day, and as David mentioned, part of the battalion's kind of instruction was to kind of waterproof as best they could, I suppose, all the equipment for the massive D-Day effort. There again, there's Lucian. Back in the day, pretty amazing to see your father and all his, the friends, John Deere folks, over there in England getting ready to do what they have to do. And of course, you heard David talk about all the trucks and the tanks. There's a picture I think Lucian took, probably in London there looking up, and of course war's going on, and it was quite a time. Now this was interesting. This was Joe Louis. Of course, it's probably the greatest heavyweight boxer in history. And you heard David talk about all the exhibitions he gave. Joe Louis also donated $100,000 of his own money for Army and Navy relief funds. And quite a patriot indeed, Joe Louis, a hero, American hero. And crossing the English Channel, November 1944. More maps of, this was near Mojave, Belgium, I think where the John Deere Battalion, as David said, was located. And you can see, of course, the Nazis had occupied. And here again, Lucian, December 1st, 1944. And that was, he lived with a family, the De Bell family, in Mojave, Belgium. And of course, the Battle of the Bulge, December 16th, 1944. And you heard David say how close the John Deere Battalion was to the German push. And again, the most significant contribution of the John Deere Battalion was the repair angle. And you heard David talk about the Germans and the Russians, kind of the disposable route where if the equipment broke down, they would just ditch it. But not so for the U.S. So, and again, that you can imagine the tough task of getting the tanks that had been in battle with, and seen casualties, and working as best they could to get them ready to go back to the front to keep us rolling to get the job done. So again, some amazing pictures here from Lucien Savoie. And look at those tanks waiting for repair. And again, here's all the skills from the mechanics and the people that had the machinery backgrounds with John Deere and other farm equipment companies, keeping these tanks running to keep the pressure on the Germans. Another picture, all the equipment to repair, troop carriers, our repair crew, again, getting the job done. A lot of the equipment scrapped for parts, but again, nothing wasted. Repaired Sherman tanks, ready for action again. And here's a note David included, talking about International Harvester, Massey Harris, J.I. Case, how they were, all these companies along with Deere were all involved in the war effort, helping us win the war. And here again, more pictures. Germany surrendering, part of the occupational force. There's a picture Lucian took. Look at the devastation in this German town, May 1945. It's amazing to look at these pictures and just wonder what those folks went through in those towns. Here's the cathedral in Cologne. David referenced that miraculously was not damaged. Another picture from Cologne August 1945. You can see the devastation in the background. And let's see, here we have a picture of Lucien in Paris on the way home. And you hear David talk about Paris, and here's the German commander that kind of disobeyed Hitler's order to burn it. And so even in the horrors of war, some good decisions were made for the right reasons under difficult circumstances. But now this picture is the SS Argentina at Camp Lucky Strike. Again, December 1945. And here's a cool note from Howard Kelsey, historical officer, John Deere Battalion. Again, the greatest generation in action. And again, on this Veterans Day, we all need to say thank you to people like Lucien Savoy that raised their hand and said, I'll go, I'll do my part. And again, huge thanks to David Savoy for telling us about the John Deere Battalion and sharing these amazing pictures.